the third one. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do today and the conversations that I wanted to have, I was kind of scanning the headlines and looking around at the news, um, and realized that if we're going to have a conversation about trust, I think we need to have a conversation about burnout. And for me, a big part of my story and my journey started in the throes of burnout. I was working a very demanding corporate job in the legal and finance world. I was putting in anywhere from 80 to 100 hours a week and really just burning not even just the candle at both ends, like the candle at all ends, the ends, the sides, everywhere. And I was an absolute mess. And my journey into trust and understanding trust, both within and outside of me, came through having to learn how to trust myself through this journey of burnout. And so when I look around at the world right now, and going back to my first episode where I talked about the world to me appearing to be in a crisis of trust, um, if trust can only ever exist at the individual level, and we're seeing rates of burnout right now that are off the charts. I don't think it's anything we've ever experienced um, across any of the generations that are currently living. And so, what has led to this? I mean, we're in a polycrisis. I mean, we can look around at the state of the world. We can look at socioeconomics. We can look at culture. We can look at the global financial markets. We can look at international conflict. There's a variety of reasons contributing to this state of burnout that we're experiencing right now. But I can only speak from my own experience. And so, what I've come to learn about burnout, about how burnout relates to self trust, and how to cultivate a practice and a habit for getting through burnout. And there's also like multiple stages of burnout as well. So I'm not just speaking to people who are in like big B burnout, full body, full system failure and collapse. It's the little B burnout, that small burn that you find yourself in consistently over time because your threshold is higher, right? It's kind of like someone who has a really high tolerance for pain doesn't feel low grade pain all the time. People who have a habit of over functioning and who have a propensity, shall we say, to burning out, um, it's a little B burn because you can't feel it. You literally don't have the capacity in you to feel like that daily burn because it's just part of your baseline. So there's the big B burn, there's the little B burn. There's the burnout that happens when your body goes, nope, you're not listening to me, so we're going to shut everything down. There's that burnout. And then there's the burnout that comes when you think you've healed from the first burnout. And that's what I've come to identify as collapse awareness fatigue. And so you feel burnt out in the sense that you're tired and your capacity for bullshit, shall we say, is a lot lower. Um, everything that's familiar to you no longer necessarily feels comfortable. And you have no idea where the heck you're going, but you know that wherever you're at right now isn't it. And it can't be it for a long period of time. And that's a different type of burn as well. But if I take it back to my story in 2017, going through full corporate burnout, I had bumped up against the holistic medical space in 2015 when I had a routine wisdom tooth surgery that literally almost killed me, put me in the hospital for 3 weeks, became a whole thing. And the only way I healed from that particular experience was meeting this chiropractic who didn't crack, who only worked on the central nervous system, and first showed me what it means to hold trauma and experience in the body and how that can manifest into various pains and diseases if left unattended. If they remain subconscious, unconscious, things that we're suppressing, avoiding, not looking at, that eventually the body will show them. And so I had like this low grade awareness of this 2014, 2015, but still living deep in survival mode and very much trying to figure out my footing in life. And that's when I was offered an opportunity to take a massive career jump and move offshore, work for a magic circle company, bringing something to market that didn't exist. It was like this big adventure, and I was lucky enough to be asked to participate. And so I was like, hell yeah. But I brought so many stories with me into that space about whether or not I deserve to be there, a lot of worthiness wounds, self-worth issues, because on paper I didn't have the goods to have that position. And I was reminded of it on a weekly basis as well, because it was the number one reason the company could get rid of me at any time if I made a mistake. So I felt like I was under a microscope more than most people because I didn't have the MBA that was required to hold that particular position. And the stakes were high. We were test driving this product, and whether it lived or died was whether or not my team was doing what they were supposed to do. So there was a lot of pressure. But in no means were we saving lives. We weren't doctors. We weren't surgeons. We weren't keeping people alive. But the environment supported us to participate like we were. And I had no boundaries, right? So eventually I did what everyone usually does in those spaces. I burnt out. I could no longer function. Not only could I no longer walk because my back was so inflamed, literally couldn't walk. I would crawl to the bathroom in the morning just to get ready for work. I just physically, mentally, emotionally could no longer carry that job. And most people in those situations, they'll either continue to try and grit their way through it, or they look at the insurance options and whether or not you have the ability to go on leave. But because I had experience throughout my life witnessing what happens when people get burnt out at work and end up inside of the insurance process and the benefit process that's constructed around your position, um, I I didn't want to do that, and I didn't know how to take time off of work without using that system, so I quit. I looked at my finances and made a decision that I didn't have to be here, so I quit. And I gave myself about 6 months off to do absolutely nothing. And it might have been the hardest 6 months of my life, because the initial pull after burnout is that you still want to feel useful. You don't want to feel like you've failed. You don't want to feel like you're lazy. You don't want to feel like you can't be a functioning member of society. So you just do. For me, I was cooking way more food than we were eating. I was spending 3 hours a day in the gym. I was painting our condo. I think I learned how to crochet. I started making bath and body products. Like, you name it, I did it. And that would have been, I left my job in October, the end of October. So for November and December, I kept myself very, very busy. And we had Christmas coming up. So it was perfect, right? I could make gifts. I could get ready for Christmas. We were traveling back to Nova Scotia. So there was all of these things. But then come January, I hit a pretty hard wall. Things got dark for a minute. And I remember having this moment of clarity where I heard very clearly, uh, you are the only common denominator of your life. And I was like offended by my thoughts at that point. Like, how dare you say that to me? How dare you think that and then say that to me? But it was true. And it came to me as I was just thinking about a variety of scenarios that I found myself in, and that they were starting to feel a little similar. Like, it's like, there seems to be a pattern. It's like I was on this edge of awareness where I'm like, there seems to be a pattern here that keeps showing up. Like, maybe all of these things aren't happening to me, and perhaps, just perhaps, I've contributed to it. And so, yeah, you are the only common denominator of your life. And then it's like, damn it. And I had to start getting really, really, really honest about who I was telling everyone I was, and how I was going to start showing up in my life. But burnout, as I learned, is not just like this sweeping event that came in. Like, once I started getting really honest about how I show up in my life, common denominator, had to figure it out. I started realizing that burnout, sure, it happened at work. I was working unimaginable hours. It was not sustainable. I had too many people pulling on me. But I got there through a series of like micro adjustments, micro concessions, those little things that happened every day, just those little moments where you say yes when you mean no, when you tell a white lie when the truth would have been okay. Like, those things compound over time, and you start to feel those effects in the places where you spend the most time, right? So for me, it was at work. And it's not just because I was doing a job that was demanding. I was doing a job that required me to leave too much of myself on the other side of the door. I could not be what I felt was my most authentic self, and function in that environment. And so something you learn when you're going through burnout is that boundaries are necessary, and you have to be able to start setting up um, limits around you, what you will say yes to, you will say no to. And when you're first kind of testing it, it's kind of like a toddler learning how to walk. We just kind of like dive into it, and they weeble wobble, they fall down. We're the same way. We tend to pendulum swing. So it's like when you experience something really negative, you will rebound in the opposite way pretty hard if you're not conscious of what you're doing. And so boundaries tend to be a little severe when you first throw them up, and they can feel a little rigid, and it makes them really hard to hold. But I did that going back into the workforce. Like, okay, I am not working. I'm not working more than my 9 to 5, right? Like if I can't have miscellaneous data for my clients, if there's no such thing as general and miscellaneous when we're trying to file documents and put things together and organizing things for our clients, then why the hell is there a general and miscellaneous in my employment contract where you seem to be able to hide an additional 20 to 30 hours a week inside of my salary? No, no, we're not doing this anymore. And so pendulums swing a little hard. And this time I'm in the insurance market, which is a very interesting space to be. Um, and it put me in a space where it's like not only am I conducting myself differently in the employee and the employer relationship, but now I'm more awake and aware of what I'm being asked to do every day. What is the actual function of my job? And not only what is the function of my job, what is the ripple effect of the function of my job? How does this contribute to society? What does it actually do? And then those became the questions that start keeping me up at night. This is that other level of burnout that you hit that again is not it's not that big B burnout. It's that little B burnout where it's like, I don't believe in what I'm doing. I don't believe this has a quantifiably long-term good impact and effect on future generations. Um, do I want to do this every day? That creates its own level of burn inside of you. And so for me, long term, it didn't. I was required to make too many concessions in the run of the day. And at that point, I was pretty committed to not lying to myself anymore. And at that time, I was just calling it self betrayal. I didn't want to lie to myself anymore because it wasn't really paying the largest dividends when I stood back and looked at everything. So it's it's a hard space to find yourself in, um, because typically we have to stay in the places and spaces that we don't necessarily want to spend the majority of our time in because there are financial considerations, there are real world considerations that we have to account for as we start making these decisions. But the reason, again, that I'm choosing to speak about burnout today is that chances are, if you're tuning in here, you're in or experiencing or have experienced burnout. And so when we look at the system and structures around us, so again, if I was to pick a random topic for Nova Scotia today to talk about, whether it was our schools or our hospitals, our municipalities, I'd have to be addressing the fact that these are organizations that are legal fictions. They're just pieces of paper. They only come to life and become what they are through the people who are operating inside of them. And if I can understand all of the ways in which I'm feeling the burn and I'm burnt out, and understanding what burnout does to my capacity, my ability to focus, my ability to retain information, my ability to manage my emotions to the point that I can make sound decisions, um, that ensure that I'm not going to be dishonest or glaze over a truth because it can upend the security that I need in order to pay my bills, take care of my family, feed myself, keep a roof over my head. Like you can see here how burnout systemically inside of the human is creating the collapse that we're experiencing around us inside of our institution. It didn't just come overnight. It is happening every single day inside of the human that is showing up in the capacities required to carry out those particular functions, but it's not happening reliably over time because the human cannot reliably function right now, is really what I'm getting at. I just assume everyone's burnt out in one way, shape, or form. Specifically, if you haven't figured out how to really curate life on your own terms, I'm assuming, unfortunately, that you are operating with a certain level of burnout. And again, getting back to the big B burnout and the little b burnout, burnout isn't one size fits all, and it's not necessarily happening in all aspects of your life, but it is touching every aspect of your life. So as I was going through my own burnout journey, I did end up in so many different spaces because for me, when something goes wrong, I start to research. I go deep, I dig, I look for solutions. I don't wait for someone to come and hand something to me. And so I was hitting the limits of my body in terms of exercise, yoga. I was blessed enough to have a Nordic spa in my building. So I was doing cold plunge, hot tub, steam room, sauna, doing a lot of work on my vagus nerve. I was doing the inner child work, the ancestral healing, the going deep into epigenetics. I was doing all of the work. And yet I still felt like I was hitting limits. I was hitting the bounds of what I could do. I was doing business development. I was looking at e-marketing. Like you name it, I was looking at it. Full holistic scope. And I just kept hitting limits and I couldn't understand why. And then I started realizing that I still had a capacity problem. And so that at the end of the day, while I was attempting to work the potential that I know that I have so much potential and I've exercised it in meaningful ways. I've demonstrated that I know how to convert my potential into meaningful action that can yield incredible results. I'm aware of that. But what I wasn't still aware of is the fact that potential has a capacity limit. And so the world has been focused, hyper focused on potential for a really long time. And we've not been looking at capacity. So then what happens if I switch this entire model on its head and start looking at capacity only? Well, friend, everything starts to change because when you're looking at potential, when you're looking at potential, you tend to really be looking at, if I do these things over time consistently, what is the compounding result going to be, right? You can make calculations on how to get there. But if you're not looking at capacity, which is, okay, this is great, these are the steps that I need to take, but do I have the time, attention, and energy required, and that's going to be required to sustain consistently over time to maintain that potential? Does that even exist? And it might exist right now, but it might not exist in 2 weeks. Do you have a plan for that? Do you know how to allocate for it? Do you even know how to measure for it so that you can potentially see it coming? And it really got me thinking that I'm like, businesses map this stuff all the time. We have these dashboards, we have KPIs, we have um, all of these reports that we're running so that these CEOs in these 12-figure companies can make these decisions with their capital, with their assets that ensure that whatever they're doing is compounding and growing over time, not accumulating losses. And if it is accumulating losses, they know how to cut it and they know how to do it before it collapses everything else. Why don't we know how to do that? And with all of these things that I've been doing, the psychology work, the emotional work, the physical work, the leadership work, why hasn't anyone shown me how to identify this? How in this expert and advice economy is no one talking about your finite amount of capacity? And that finite amount of capacity is not just in one area. It's not just maybe in your job. It's not just in how you're showing up in your relationships. It's not just in how much time you're putting in at the gym. It's like your entire life has a finite capacity, and you need to be able to slice it over all of the different areas of your life to understand perhaps maybe where more of your time, attention, and energy is going. And is that actually yielding you any results? Or is it becoming detrimental to other areas of your life? And can seeing that alone be enough to switch something? And I decided yes. Because if Marie Kondo taught us anything in 2020, it's that you only keep the things that spark joy in your life, right? Marie Kondo showed us physically, tangibly, what happens when you set up very specific containers in your life and allow yourself to see what's there. Why can't we do that as people? So I did it. I started doing it on myself. And that's how I came up with what I now call Sovran Wellth. Because I was looking at all of the areas of my life and I had identified that there's 9 things, 9 buckets, 9 areas that kind of covered everything. And that was physical, emotional, intellectual, creative, connection, vocation, environment, resources, and faith. And so it brought me back to this when I was in the middle of burnout. One of the things that I started doing for myself was going to this intuitive development class. And I would find myself up in the plateau of Montreal in this little tea room after hours with about 7 or 8 other ladies. And we would just come together and we would meditate, and we were guided through like a series of meditations or experiments that really allowed us to tap into our intuition and learn how to listen to our gut. And one of the practices that we did was a spiritual house where they had walked us through a home. And it was a really powerful and meaningful exercise to me, because not only am I like an interior designer in a former life, so architecture and design makes sense to me. Walking through a home in my mind is very easy. We all understand what it's like for the most part to live in a home. We've been in a home. We can relate to a home. You're probably sitting in a home right now listening to this. So when you do an exercise that requires you to walk through your home, we all kind of have an idealized version of what that is. But then we also have one that we live in, which means once you can see it in your mind, you start to see it in your environment around you. And so what happened if I took those like 9 areas of life and started overlaying them on a home? right? But not based on, what room represents what field. It's like every field has a capacity. And so when you think of your home or a home, what room fulfills that capacity, right? So for example, just read you an example that I have here. If I talk about your physical capacity is your ability to store and sustain energy throughout your body, right? So the capacity of that space in your home would be for nourishment, preparation, and intake. And it's where the body is resourced, energy is generated or depleted, and physical capacity is either sustained or overridden, right? Where's that happening already in your home? For some people, it might be the kitchen. For other people, it may be a space where they are getting physical. It could be their living room. It could be their basement. It could be a gym. We all have these spaces, right? It's not for me to tell you where to go. It's where would you like to take this? It's yours, right? It's yours to do with what you wish. And what I've found is that when you're able to kind of sit in your house and read it, account for it through these different fields, you start to see your life in a really different way. You start to allocate things, people, places, things that you may have thought were related to your job, to your work, to your vocation, the issues that you're having in that space, well, they actually don't live there. They lived in your emotional field. And maybe the stuff that you thought was emotional isn't actually emotional, it's sitting in your physical field. And all those burdens that you're carrying in your physical field, those issues, the areas that you're collapsing and not necessarily thriving in, well, that might be coming from your vocation. And you start to be able to look at all of these things that are usually sitting in that invisible backpack that you carry every day, that it's there, but you don't want to dig through it because in order to get to one thing, you have to go through other things and it's just a whole mess. Like, we don't like doing that, not inherently, not by nature. But when truth becomes that touchstone, you'll hear me talk about HALT a lot: honesty, acceptance, loyalty, and trust. The only way you get to trust is through brutal honesty and an acceptance of where that honesty has brought you. And then can you continue to build habits every day that are in alignment with your truth and what you accept to be happening in front of you, so that you can start to build trust? We have to build trust from the inside out. And again, this is why we're talking about burnout today. Because in my experience, burnout is something that happens through a series of micro adjustments. We micro adjust our way into burnout. And again, neutral, always neutral. It's always a neutral word. So some could say it's micro concessions that you make one way or another. You're making those tiny little shifts every single day that keep you in a state of self-betrayal, that keep you over functioning, staying overcapacitated in specific areas of your life, that are not allowing you to resolve that burn that you're feeling in your core, that burn. Anyone who has been in a state of burnout is in a state of burnout, doesn't know what it feels like to not be in a state of burnout. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard for you to imagine that there is a space you can be in, that you're not hypervigilant, that you're not kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, that you're not waiting for someone to come pull on you because they need your time, attention, and energy. When that is your baseline 100% of the time, it sounds foreign that you can live a life where you get to take a breath and where you get to take a minute before you make a big decision, and where you have the space to actually be able to discern what's happening around you instead of responding or reacting to it right away. That's how you learn to build trust with yourself, when you realize that the world doesn't burn down when you take a moment before you respond. It's a big topic right now. And it's so interesting, because something that I was thinking about the other day, it's because I've spent so much of my professional career centralizing, consolidating, streamlining, trying to make everything as efficient and as effective as possible for some of the largest corporations in the world. And then you start to realize that only a handful of people really truly know how to do that, right? When you walk into businesses and when you walk into organizations, or when you look at corporations, the project management teams, the workflow teams, the governance teams, they're small, right? There's not a lot of people doing that. And yet we're now at a place in the world where we've seen the effects of globalization. We know what it means now to fully outsource everything, to the point that it's crippled us economically, outsource things that it's crippling us physically, mentally, emotionally, because we don't know how to do for ourselves. But again, the pendulum swing and the knee-jerk reaction is to decentralize. Well, if only a handful of people understand how everything got centralized in the first place, and humans, through this centralization process, have outsourced so much of their own accountability and responsibility to all of these organizations and institutions that have centralized everything on our behalf. I'm sorry, most people don't have the ability to hold the complexity of what that centralization required in order to decentralize effectively and appropriately. There's going to be chaos. This is where burnout comes from. When people realize that they don't actually have the capacity to hold all of these moving parts that are happening in their life right now, because they've never taken an honest inventory and accounting of what they have there in the first place, because there's been no meaningful way to do it. There's no meaningful way right now for a human to kind of do like this cross field inventory of their life, to know where they're truly at max capacity, where they've fallen for the potential fallacy, right? That you can always reach your potential, that you can dig, but without the capacity to reach that potential remains potential, right? This is why I've created what I've created. It is taking all of that experience at the global level, understanding how these multinational private equity firms can maintain 50,000 companies around the world pretty effectively and efficiently and seamlessly, and continue to compound value and growth, right? They didn't become 12-figure companies out of luck. There's strategy, there's systems, there's structure. And that structure starts with trust. And you have to be able to trust what you're seeing. You have to be able to trust your perception. Again, this is why when it comes to trust, I'm always telling people you have to halt. You have to be able to trust your perception. You have to be brutally honest about what you're seeing, accept that it's there and how it got there. Look at the ways that you showed up every day to create that outcome. Is that outcome trustworthy or not? Where do you now need to go back and reevaluate and do better now that you know better? Micro adjustments. You micro adjust your way into these things, whether it's burnout, whether it's wealth generation, whatever it is. Tiny little micro adjustments. But these 12-figure companies had very clean, very simple dashboards. They also only had a finite amount of business units that they would entertain. And if their acquisitions didn't fit into those business units, they weren't part of they were very clear on their jurisdiction. They were very clear on their intentions. They were very clear on what they wanted to spend their time, attention, and money and energy on. And they had a dashboard that could bring it up very quickly. So we have the same thing. We have a finite amount of capacity. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much oil to burn in your body. You can only fuel yourself so much. You can only sleep so much. You can only hold so much. So what does it look like when we start to take those accountings, right? Across the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the creative, connective relationships, vocation, the environment that you're in, the resources that you have access to, and the faith and belief structures, the unseen support mechanisms that exist in your life that make everything so. If you can't see it, you can't do anything with it. So what happens when those things now become visible? The fact that you even know that those domains of your life exist and that one impacts the other, I mean, that's a pretty big start. Again, I go back to the Marie Kondo example where she just pulls out all of the bins, clothes, bills, toys, right? You don't have to know everything that's in the bin. You just have to know that there's a bin that it goes in. And that when that bin starts to overflow, it means that you're going to have a space allocation issue for everything else, right? Those are our intangible thoughts. Just because they're floating around doesn't mean that they're not manifesting in our world, right? Thoughts become things. Thoughts become your words. Words become your world. It shows up everywhere. So for me, burnout and my path through burnout, my journey through burnout, my healing through burnout has become accelerated because we still go through these things. Like, just because you've gone through it once doesn't mean you're not going to go through it again. And even when you know better, you're still going to find yourself in a similar situation at one point in time because a blind spot gets interrupted. And you're like, oh, here's a pattern that's bringing me back into burnout. It's like, I don't think it's something you ever fully heal from. And I think believing you can fully heal from it and that it's ever going to go, or that it can completely go away, is a delusion that we feed ourselves because we slip out of conscious awareness all the time and into our programming. So inevitably something's going to happen. It's just how quickly are you going to catch it? How quickly are you going to catch that mechanism that throws you into overfunctioning and pushes you into a space where you already know what the outcome's going to be if you're really honest with yourself? And if you don't make a change now, if you don't change how you're participating in it in the moment, it's just going to keep going. Those are the micro adjustments that pull us back into the present moment and allow us to kind of start breaking habits as they happen. But for me, it goes back to running Halt on a regular basis. It's kind of now my back end operating system when something shows up in front of me. You know, some people are like, is it kind? Is it necessary? You know, does it advance a truth? Sure. For me, is it honest? Can I accept it? Am I betraying or creating loyalty? And does this make me trustworthy or not? Every single moment. And then when you start taking that approach, when you're looking at what's going in your buckets, what's sitting in your physical bucket, what's sitting in your emotional bucket, what's sitting in your vocation bucket, and you start applying that lens, honesty, acceptance, loyalty, and trust to everything that you're holding. In Marie Kondo's space, you'd be holding something going, does this spark joy? Maybe it does, but maybe for all the wrong reasons. We have to get honest about that. So, yeah, burnout. It's the topic of the day. It's the topic of the generation. Um, I I don't think we're collectively having the conversation as nuanced as it needs to be. I think there's a lot of nuance in burnout. I think burnout has just become a catch-all popular term. It's like the junk drawer term of system failure and collapse. So we have to get really, really honest about why is the system at failure? Why is it collapsing? If this collapses, what are we left with? Are we watching the centralized something version of something collapse? And now we're left with all of these fragments and all of these pieces, and we have no idea where they go and what they do because we don't even understand how it became centralized in the first place, right? Our systems and structures have centralized at a rate much faster than we have. In fact, I think we have decentralized and fragmented at the rate that the world around us has centralized. And we're hitting that inflection point right now where we just have to hit pause and understand that hitting pause, halting, taking that moment, taking a beat, creating the space around us to think and see clearly is the only option right now. It's the only option. In a world that wants you to move faster than ever before, stillness, taking a beat, taking a moment is your superpower. And when you can take that moment, the reason again, those fields, why I see them as the culmination of the entire capacity of your life, why I call it Sovran Wellth, is because the only things of value in this world are human beings and the earth. And whatever comes out of the earth has to be extracted through the sweat equity of a human, and then it has to be made into something. All intrinsic value sits inside of you, and you have so much value sitting inside of your life experience and the things that you've done and the places that you've been and what you've helped create, the lessons that you've learned when things didn't go so well. That's all sitting there. A lot of it's sitting in the invisible backpack because it also has a lot of trauma attached to it and things that we have to be willing to honestly evaluate and look through. But in a world right now that's trying to scare you in an AI takeover or make you feel like you have no agency or that you're powerless and that the cost of living is going out of control, like, yes, all those things are true and we have to be mindful of it, which is why you have to kind of keep one foot in the clouds and one foot on the ground. Yes, all of those things are true, but you as an individual are also infinitely, infinitely valuable and invaluable in many ways. And you just have to change the way you're looking at things. You just have to be able to see everything that you're holding. Anyone who's gone to a leadership coach or a business coach and you've had that aha moment where you're like, oh, that's not a skill, it's a talent. You understand the difference between the two. When you haven't realized that the innate brilliance that you've brought to every job wasn't necessarily a skill you were learning on the job. It was your quality, your je ne sais quoi. But it's when those things get muddied, when we don't know the difference between the two, that we undervalue ourselves. We undervalue what we have to offer. We undervalue what our experience and how we choose to participate in this world, what it can actually do, what it actually means, the value that it can have on other people. That's why I feel very passionate about being able to give people tools that are very similar to what I witnessed in the 1% club, if you will, that allows them to compound value over time, that we can actually do it with ourselves, and not necessarily with the tangible assets that we have in our hand, but with the intangibles that we can't even see yet. And then once you can see them, oh my God, how quickly your world changes. Right? It's not necessarily about finding your purpose. And, again, in the advice and the expert economy, everyone's telling you how to find your purpose and how to tap into your expertise. It's like, okay, but it's still another extractive model. It's still going to keep you in a space of chasing, right? It's where you kind of get into that really fine line between identifying and honoring your capacity and understanding it so that you can maximize it and grow it over time, but slowly. Or are you going to go all in on potential and burn your circuits in the process? As someone who's gone in all in on potential multiple times and burnt her circuits, it's not what I recommend. It's really not. It's that move out of instant gratification. We got to move out of the instant gratification. We have to move out of waiting for everything to be done for us. This is that centralization I was talking about earlier. We've outsourced everything as humans, our agency, our accountability, our responsibility. We've made everyone else responsible for us more than we have become responsible for ourselves. And so it takes time out of your day to learn how to start managing your life and taking accountability for your life and taking responsibility for your life. And so a lot of people say, oh, well, I can't actually get out from under burnout because I'm too busy. You're not. You're not too busy. You have misallocated capacity. You have misallocated time. You're spending time, attention, and energy on things that aren't as important as your ability to make sure that you don't collapse, that you don't hit system failure. And again, I say that as someone who has been there, who has done it, who has told herself every lie, every fallacy that I could have told myself to make my problems and my issues about someone else, until I couldn't anymore, until I had that oh shit moment where I very clearly heard that I was the only common denominator of my life, that whatever I wasn't changing, I was choosing, and that absolutely no one else in my life would ever be more honest, more loyal, more trustworthy to me than I was to myself. And if it didn't start with me, then it wasn't going to start anywhere else. It's a tough pill to swallow. That is a tough, tough, tough pill to swallow, especially when you're already burnt out and when you're already depleted and where you feel like you don't have anywhere else to go but down. But I promise you that the moment you can get that honest with yourself, that you can be that brutally brutally honest with who you're actually being and how you got to that point, the healing that happens after that is so fast. It moves so quickly. When you can move through the biggest lie you tell yourself and survive it, friend, let me tell you, your life will never be the same. Your life will never be the same. And then when you stop lying to yourself, you stop allowing anyone else to lie to you. And that's going to be the people that you work with. It's going to be in your closest relationships. It's going to be in your politicians. It's going to be in your local businesses. You stop letting people lie to you. And then you start holding them accountable in the same way that you hold yourself accountable. Do you see the ripple effect here? Do you see why we have to figure out how to reclaim our status and move out of burnout, whether it's big B burn, little b burn, move out of burnout so that we can move into these spaces where we individually become so trustworthy that it's impossible for the spaces outside of us to not be trustworthy. But it does start with the burnout and being brutally honest about why you're burnt out, where it started, and if you actually want to solve it. The burn can be addictive, right? Not everybody wants to solve their burnout issue, and that's okay. But at least be honest with yourself. But anyway, we're coming up on an hour, so thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here. I made sure to unhook the earphones this time, so it should have been much clearer. But yeah, I have a process that I'm putting together right now to kind of share this house exercise that I have found incredibly activating for myself in terms of being able to place all of the things that I'm kind of carrying in here outside of me in a way that I can tangibly do something with it and start reallocating and balancing my capacity in my life so that I can show up as a better human, less stressed, more joyful, more peaceful. I'm a better friend. I'm a better I'm a better everything because I have a handle on my capacity and I can tell when it's wobbling. Right? It's kind of like when you're driving down the car and you need an alignment. You don't wait to go this way completely. You start to feel the wobble and you go in and you realign. That's what this is. It's like this instant diagnostic. So I'm excited to share that. But yeah, I hope you found this somewhat useful, enlightening. But again, trust is what I talk about. It's what I'm passionate about. We will never see it outside of ourselves greater than the degree to which we secure it inside of ourselves. And that requires that we know our capacity, that we are functioning inside of our capacity at all times. And so I will leave you with that for now. And I will see you next Tuesday.